Ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday. This is the Rotary Club of Fort Worth, and it's time for Rotary. I want you to maybe work your way towards your seats, and let's call this meeting to order. We have a very full meeting today with lots of fun announcements, so I'm just going to jump right in. There's one thing I want to reiterate. You know, last week we had the folks from Texas Wesleyan here. We had some football players. We had some of the Gold Line dance team. We had Coach Joe Prudhomme and Fred Slaybach last January or March, I can't quite recall. But all that to say that Global Classico, the international Tex-Mex football game, is tomorrow night. And so on the table are your flyers. There is a VIP, I'm trying to think of the word, tailgate, but it's not there. You can have your own tailgate in the parking lot, or you can come inside the bowl for the tailgate, and there are going to be multiple bands, and then the game kickoff is at 7. And just to remind you, there are going to be 8 lucky VIP pass winners, where you will have barbecue dinner and a few other special tidbits. And so Roland Johnson is here today, and at the end of this meeting, we're going to pull names out of this bowl. And so Aurora is going to check between now and 12:30. You can still purchase a ticket and have your name in the drawing. And we'll settle up at the end of the meeting with extra information for the winners. That's it. And so now let's continue on. Key Bryant, Regional Manager with After School Programming with Idea Schools, will lead us in the invocation. And Wesley Gentle, the Interim Managing Director and President of Arts Fort Worth, will lead us in the National Anthem.
Please bow your heads. Gracious God, we come to you with bowed heads and humbled hearts, thanking you for the day, the food, the friendships and fellowship here at Fort Worth Rotary Club. We especially thank you for your safekeeping during this week's storms. Lord, we ask for your guidance as we are to be your hands and feet to do the good work that you have purposed each of our lives for. We, the Rotarians and our guests, seek not only to better Fort Worth, but also the world at large by using our talents and gifts to honor you. Lord, we pray that our actions be aligned to your will for our lives and that we seek you first in all that we do. Please continue to bless us today and each day of our lives as we continue to be blessings to others. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
So as you take your seats, pick up your phone, check out those QR codes on that flyer. You've got 25 more minutes to purchase. Adult tickets are $10. Teenagers 13 through 18 are $5, and 12 and under is free, so it's a great family event. And now we want to welcome visiting Rotarians and guests. Here's Dr. Dianelle Waters, Executive Director of Idea Schools.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I'm so honored to be able to do our acknowledgement of our visitors with us that are with us in person as well as on Zoom. So once your name is called, we ask that you would give us a friendly wave. We have Miss Deborah Connor, the guest of Bob Mitchell. Thank you. We have Ms. Sharon Allen, the guest of Mr. Jim Austin. we have Ms. Karen Staggers, the guest of Mr. Jim Alston. And last but not least, we have Mr. Jeff Donahue, the guest of Mr. Don Click. Thank you so much for your presence with us today.
And now, this is our four-way test. Number one, is it the truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And now the moment of truth. Frank Shields is here to present our newscast. There you are.
Thank you for that vote of confidence. Well, everyone is complaining these days about supply chain problems exacerbated by a shortage of truck drivers. In an effort to remedy this situation, there are many student truck drivers on the road trying to learn the business. Unfortunately, this has created some road hazards. One in particular happened recently when a truck loaded with thousands of copies of Roget's Thesaurus spilled its load, leaving witnesses stunned, startled, aghast, stupefied, confused, shocked, rattled, paralyzed, dazed, bewildered, surprised, dumbfounded, flabbergasted, confounded, astonished, and numb. Business Week reported that the US will import $400 billion worth of laptops, phones, and home electronics this year. All of these goods used to be made in the good old USA. My new flat screen TV carries a sticker on the back that reads built-in antenna, and I have no idea where that is. According to the New York Post, food safety lawyers blamed the FDA for the baby formula shortage. They shut down the plant when all they had to do was just have them clean it up. You notice we never had any baby formula shortages until men started to get pregnant. The weather and economic swings have been quite extreme lately, which prompted me to write a little ditty, but it's not about Jack and Diane. It's called Tarrant County Dreamin', and it goes like this. All the grass is brown and the trees are gray. I've been for a ride on a summer's day. I'd reach my destination, but not with gas this way. Tarrant County dreamin' on such a summer's day. Stopped into a church and I began to pray. How I'd love some rain any given day. God has a sense of humor, but why this way? Tarrant County dreamin' on such a summer's day. That concludes the musical part of the newscast. Now, in golf news, David Campbell was overheard claiming that when he was young, he was a poor golfer. But after years of play and practice, he's no longer young. As everyone here is aware, cyber fraud is a big problem. Phishing, ransomware, email compromise are giving us all fits. I'm warning you right now, if you get an email related to canned meats, please do not open it, as it most likely is spam. Well, we've all heard stories of people who ended up in the emergency room with the strangest things, right, Sean? Just recently, someone was admitted to JPS that had eaten an entire case of SpaghettiOs. They ended up having a rather large bowel movement. Richard Knight recently returned from an epic vacation exploring Yellowstone, where Geezer met Geyser. I know, I'm gonna get it for that. Well, it's election time, so we have another disease that we're supposed to worry about. The WHO is asking the public for help with the monkeypox name change. While the WHO does not want to make any rash decisions, the organization is just itching to come up with a solution. Officials say it can be stigmatizing to primates it was named after. The WHO are a little disappointed in the names they've received so far, though. And those include, and this is, I'm just giving the news, Poxy McPockface, Orthopox 22, Magnus Pox, Climber Pox, and Toxic Rash of Unrecognized Mysterious Provenance of 22, or Trump 22. We have also heard here at the news desk that other groups are considering protesting other diseases. For instance, Pilgrim's Pride and Tyson are having issues with chicken pox. And finally, speaking of chicken, a Chick-fil-A restaurant in Henderson, North Carolina created controversy the other day by recruiting workers with an offer of 5 free entrees in lieu of regular wages for a 1-hour shift. Perhaps even more offensive, however, was calling a Chick-fil-A sandwich an entree. And that's the rest of the story. Good day.
Thank you, Frank, for that musical newscast. You and Harriet are our singing duo. So a few quick announcements. The Walton Readers Program is starting up. Many of you that have been around since at least 2015 will recall that that was the product of our high impact project. And of course, last year with COVID, it did interfere somewhat getting back into the classroom like we had normally. But this year, all of the COVID restrictions and barriers have been removed. And we just want to have you start thinking about that. There are 55 third graders, and we need 28 volunteers. Maddie Compton will be here at the next meeting to really kick it off, but please be putting that into your thoughts for potential scheduling. Also today at 1:30, class number 91 is graduating from the Fire Academy. And the top graduate is Natalie Moore. And past President Larry is going to be attending along with our new chair for the Law Enforcement and Safety Committee, which is Jared Sloan, who is also a long-term volunteer firefighter. So that is that's a great mix. And more girl power in line with top graduate Natalie Moore. This Sunday, the 28th, is a milestone in our club history. Geneva Wright was elected as the first female member of our club in 1987. So that is a fun date for our club. And now I would like to bring up Richard Knight for a flag presentation.
I bring greetings from Bozeman, Montana, where I did just come from an epic bucket list vacation, geezer comment notwithstanding. On behalf of President Rob Miller of the Sunrise Bozeman, Montana Rotary Club, this flag is to you, President Sean, and we appreciate all your service.
Thank you, Richard.
Absolutely.
This is for us. This is obviously for all of us, Bozeman, Montana. Yeah, thank you, Richard.
You bet.
You know, as you go on your travels, whether they're domestic or international, you too can grab yourselves some Rotary Club of Fort Worth banner flags. And it really is a lot of fun to pop in. You know, as a Rotarian, there's a Club Finder app that's very handy. You can also, it's a little more tedious to go online, but you can literally in a matter of seconds with your app, pull up any place in the world, put in a town or a zip code or other identifying information, and it will populate with all of the Rotary meetings that are in that area. You click on each one, it'll tell you the secretary, the president, the meeting location, the date, the time. And again, as a Rotarian, you are automatically invited to participate in any of those events. Thank you again, Richard. And now, to tell us more about our very exciting new Interact initiative, Dr. Shagranda Traveler and Judge Randall Fluke. If they're not, are they not here? Oh, I'm sorry, there you are. I hadn't quite seen you. Thank you, Dr. Traveler.
Good afternoon, all Rotarians. Thank you all so much for being here. I'll be brief, and I'm going to do this on behalf of Judge Fluke, but we are in the process of creating an Interact Club. And so by show of hands, who knows what that is? Awesome, awesome. So what we're trying to do, we have partnered with 2 local schools, Young Women Leadership Academy, as well as I Am Terrell. And so as we're going through the process, we're looking for committee members, volunteers who would be willing to help us with that initiative. More to come. We're at the very beginning stages of creating this, but again, we just want to put it out there, what we're trying to do. So again, think about how can you support. It's going to be 9th through 12th grade. And then with that, I have been asked to put the curriculum together so that each month, as we're meeting with these young students, we're getting them prepared. We have buy-in from those 2 campuses. They're very excited. And so now we want you to be excited about the process as well. So more to come. Just want to put this out as a filler for you to start thinking about. But again, Interact Club, Young Women's Leadership Academy, as well as I Am Terrell. Thank you.
I can mention just a few more quick tidbits about that. So of course, Interact, what it's really all about, it's an opportunity for us to educate the next young generation of future citizens in the ideals and principles of the 4-way test and service above self and business ethics and certainly international peace. So that is the underlying theme of everything there, and much of it is meant to be student-led, and there will be monthly meetings, some of which will be perhaps populated with members or colleagues in the community as speakers, and then the other will be student-led, and there will be a number of international and particularly local service initiatives. And we all know YWLA, of course, and so it's fabulous to re-partner with them. I'm especially excited about the I Am Terrell campus. Many of you may know it was the first African-American high school in Fort Worth. It originally opened in 1892. The campus now is not the original campus. The campus currently was built in, I think, the 1920s. We had a meeting yesterday, and the principal and the Friends of I Am Terrell president were here last January to receive one of our endowment grants, which they're very appreciative of. And that seed was planted that day. And the faculty advisor there is actually a former Rotarian from Skokie, Illinois, who had experienced a career change and became a humanities instructor. And the kids at both campuses, you know, YWLA, if my information is still accurate, it's the highest ranking school within Fort Worth ISD and one of the top ranking in the state and even the country. And I Am Terrell is the STEM magnet and visual and performing arts magnet here in Fort Worth. And it's a fantastic campus. They have about 500 kids. Both schools are really amazing, high-performing youth. And the I Am Terrell campus has a beautiful 1,000-seat performance venue with a black box theater. So I think surely we can find some future Rotary outings over there. And now I wanted to bring up Tim Halden to tell us more about the USS Fort Worth Happy Hour coming up, I think it's September 12th.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you may remember, last January, the Rotary Club welcomed the crew members from the USS Fort Worth with a happy hour at, wasn't Ruth Chris, it was one across the street. Anyway, we're going to do the same this year. It's going to be Monday, September 12th from 4 to 6 at Capitol Grill. So tickets are on sale for that. I believe they're $30. If you'd like to buy a drink for a sailor, come join us. Additionally, the USS Fort Worth Support Committee would like to invite you to our 10th anniversary party, celebrating obviously the 10th anniversary of the christening of the ship. That will be Sunday the 11th. It will be at, I think it's 2525 McMillan Parkway. 2550, thank you, Larry. And Larry and his lovely wife have graciously donated the space for us. Tickets for that event will be $75. So you can go to the USS Fort Worth Support Committee website to buy those tickets. I believe the links were also in the rotograph that Aurora sent out this afternoon, or please feel free to come see me and I'll help you take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you too to Shanna Saldana, who had put that whole evening together on the 12th. And I understand that Mayor Parker will be there. So in addition to the sailors, that's just one more reason to go to the Capitol Grill on the 12th. Now I would like to welcome, we have two new Blue Badgers, Tyra Ingram and Estrus Tucker. If you could approach the stage, please. Welcome to these two Blue Badgers. And now I suspect this may be a first for our club. I know that probably we've had some parent-child relationships in the club, but today it's rather unique. We have a female Rotarian who is going to be introducing her father as our program speaker, so it's a very sweet moment. And at that, I would like to bring up Ashley LeCamp.
Hello. My name is Ashley LeCamp. I'm a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. I'd like to introduce our speaker. He is the Senior Vice President and Financial Advisor at Morgan Stanley. He's been in the industry for about 37 years. He's also got a radio show, and you may have seen him on CNBC every once in a while. He's also the chairman of the investment committee for the Fort Worth Pension Board, and in his free time, he is the lead singer of not one, but two cover bands. Please welcome Jim LeCamp.
That's a first. Never been introduced by my daughter before. Well, I mean, she introduced me to her fiance, but I already knew him. I'm a little thrown off by the Fort Worth Club here, and I'm on the board here. But I was in before we came out here, I was in a bathroom. It said employees must wash hands, but I couldn't find any employees. So I didn't know what to do. I knew I'd get a bad reaction out of Bob Mitchell. Yeah. A lot of friends in here. Captain Kirk at my table over here. So there's a lot going on, obviously, in the economy and in the financial markets. It's really gotten more interesting than it has been in a long time. And I think today Jerome Powell spoke, and he compared the current environment to the environment 40 years ago, when we last had these type of inflation numbers. And I remember them well. My dad was in the Air Force. He retired. We were in Southern California at the time. We did live out at Carswell for a while, but we were in Southern California at the time. And my mother's father was in the real estate business, had a heart attack, and they decided to retire from the Air Force and move to Springfield, Missouri. And Dad would help out with the family business, which was real estate. Well, I don't think he really knew what he was in for, because interest rates at that time shot up so high and so fast. Mortgage rates went over 20%, and it basically wiped out that business. And it was painful for me because I was a freshman in college, and I had to figure out a way to put myself through school. So I remember that time frame very, very well. And we were talking about it, even when I was in high school, we were talking about it. Back then, in school, you actually talked about things like the economy, and you talked about, you learned how to do math, and we didn't have any discussions about personal pronouns when I was in high school. Sorry, I don't want to step on anybody's toes here. But what happened is Paul Volcker, the Fed made a lot of mistakes in that time frame. The biggest mistake that, the biggest policy mistake was getting us off the gold standard. But moving beyond that, the Fed would lower rates, raise rates. They really didn't know what they were dealing with. And until Paul Volcker came along very late in the Carter administration, he convinced President Carter, you got to raise interest rates so high that it chokes off growth, and that'll choke off inflation. And they started that process. They paused it a little bit during that presidential election year because Volcker didn't want to be blamed if Carter lost that election. But Carter did lose the election. Reagan continued the policy. And by 1982, the economy was in a recession. And at that point, you may remember Reagan gave a famous speech, which was stay the course. This is going to work. And it did. And the important thing to know about that is that interest rates were at a 40-year, they were at all-time highs. And since then, 40 years, the next 40 years, interest rates fell. So we had a period of 40 years of falling interest rates. What does that do for real estate? Helps it. What does it do for the stock market? Helps it. So we had a pretty good run of prosperity, and the recessions that we had, in my view, were aided and abetted by a Federal Reserve Board that became far more sensitive to recessions than they should have been. And it started with Alan Greenspan, but it continues on to this day. And that is every time we got anywhere near a recession, Fed would lower rates and pump money into the economy. So much so that by 2007, the Fed's balance sheet had exploded to $488 billion. Today it's $9 trillion. And it increased by 40% over the last 2 years. The overall number of dollars in our economy increased by 40% over 2 years. And didn't have to. Our interest rates around, if you compare our interest rates to interest rates around the world, the Fed did not need to keep buying our bonds. They didn't. They would have been bought because our interest rates are higher than virtually any developed country around the world. And the US is in a better economic spot than most countries around the world. And it was absolutely unnecessary. And it's now caused all sorts of problems. I was an economics major at Baylor, and back then we studied what we call a Minsky moment. And that's that moment named after a famous economist where new debt doesn't help asset prices anymore. And obviously we've hit that spot. And there's a lot of discussion right now about whether we're in a recession or heading into a recession. But to me, that's not really the question. Because you can argue about whether we're in a recession or not. It's interesting because everybody agreed that 2 quarters of negative GDP growth was the definition of a recession until the party in power hit that spot. And they have said, well, it needs to be redefined. And actually, they do have a point, because there's many parts of our economy that are still expanding. And the jobs market isn't what you would normally see in a recession. But I do believe we are either in a recession or headed straight into it. And I still don't think that's the question. Are we in a recession? Capital expenditure plans are plummeting. If you look at the manufacturing surveys across the country, they're all turning down dramatically. The housing market is struggling. I don't know if you saw the headline this morning. The biggest purchaser of homes in the United States over the last 10 years has been Blackstone. And now they're stopping the purchasing of homes in 38 markets. And it's about 40% of their footprint. And people are struggling to pay their electric bills. The used car market has had repossessions jump 300%. And we don't see it as much around here because our economy is doing much better than the rest of the country. And that's the good news. And there will be good news here. Most of the new jobs around the country are also part-time. The jobs numbers include, you have to be really careful with them because there's a lot of seasonal adjustments that happen with the jobs numbers. And there's a lot of people working 2 jobs and a lot of part-time jobs that are happening here. And a lot of it you can put squarely on the inflation environment. And if you want to get a little grittier, a little more granular there on energy prices. Now, the administration has said they've been lauding the fact that gasoline prices have been down about 70 days in a row. But if you look at natural gas prices and oil prices, they've turned back up. And they had released this strategic petroleum reserves, and that dries up. So there's a lot of reasons to believe that gasoline prices are going to turn back up. And in the oil patch, they have the capital expenditure plans are nowhere near what we would normally see with prices that have spiked like they have. And there's reasons for that. The ESG environment has sent the message to a lot of financial institutions, don't buy their bonds. I don't know if you've seen the news about the state of Texas saying that they're going to sanction UBS and BlackRock because they're hostile to the fossil fuel industry. But because of ESG concerns, et cetera, the funding for a lot of the drilling activity here in Texas and around the country has really not occurred like it always has during oil price spikes. It used to be the cure for high oil prices was high oil prices. They just drilled a lot more of it because the prices were high, and all of a sudden you had too much supply and prices came back down. That's what we call supply and demand. It's a pretty simple concept, but we've forgotten it. Now we're in a monopoly money environment, and we really are. I mean, if you are playing Monopoly and the banker all of a sudden materializes and gives everybody 3 times more money, what happens to Park Place? What happens if you land on Park Place? It's not good. That's what's happening in our economy. Those that had resources and assets that were able to take advantage of higher stock prices, real estate prices, collectible cars, art, classic guitars, my favorite. All those prices went up for a long period of time because we were just putting more and more money in the system. And it didn't really help those on the lower end of the spectrum. You could argue it did. Their 401k plans went higher, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But look at the cost. Who gets hurt by higher energy costs? Those on the lower end of the economic spectrum. And it's the natural result of them printing this much money unnecessarily and throwing it into the economy, and they're still doing it. You know, the student loan thing, I get it. I had student loans. It's painful. But you're going to give money to people making $200,000 a year with college degrees, and you've got people that can't afford to pay their electric bill? I don't get it. It's turned into less of a supply and demand economy and more of a monopoly money economy. So we had this time frame for 40 years. And I'll shift gears here. Ashley mentioned I'm on the pension board. First of all, I want to point out, I've only been on the pension board for 3 years, so I'm not responsible. But let me tell you the challenge they have, but it represents the challenge everybody has now. So our assumed rate, you have to have an assumed rate if you're a pension fund. And they're way too high across the entire country. They're way too high. I've seen them. They're terrible. So the assumed rate in 2019 for ours was 7.75%. I was the other guy that they put on the board with me was a guy named Brian Barrett. He's with the Bass organization, and we immediately asked that they lower that rate. And you know, when you do things like that, there's all sorts of other debates that happen in a pension fund. Who contributes? You know, what are the metrics that we're going to go by moving forward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So none of it's easy. But we lowered it to 7, which is as low as we could get them to go. I'd like to see it lower. But think about that. What's the yield right now on the 10-year Treasury bond? 3.12%. And if you're a pension fund, you got to own some Treasury bonds. So automatically, you're in trouble. You have a 7% bogey. You have to own some Treasury bonds and corporate bonds. You're not going to get 7 on any of that right now. And not only that, those are all paying well below the inflation rate right now. And this is why risk assets have done well up until very, very recently, because rates were falling, and eventually there became in the last few years, there became really no other place to put your money. But inflation happened. It was a matter of time, but it happened. And it was that perfect storm. You know, the oil companies were using the money that came in now to pay dividends and do share buybacks because the environment was very hostile. Not only that, they can't get workers out there, because a lot of people in the patch were tired of working for a year and getting laid off for a year. So it's a boom bust business. But because of all of these things, energy prices are going to remain pretty high. And that means the Fed is going to have to keep things pretty rough on the cycle. The bond market has been saying the Fed's going to stop. If you look at what the bond market futures are projecting, the bond market has been projecting the Fed would stop raising rates in December. The Fed has said, no, we're not going to stop in December. We're going to keep going. And today, not only did Powell reference the days of Paul Volcker and pointed out that he had to get real aggressive because the Fed before him didn't. They're trying to avoid that now, but they're missing the point. It's not inflation for the same reasons we had inflation in the 70s. This is inflation being caused by a number of bad policies, not just here in the US. It's policymakers all over the world. Resources. Have you seen that farmers in Denmark are loading up the border with piles of BS, and I mean BS in the literal sense of the word, because of policies that have rendered them unprofitable. If you look at the Russia-Ukraine war and look at the areas that Russia is really focusing on, it's resources. Lithium, carbon, copper. It's all about resources. And it's become very, very weaponized. And what does this mean for all of us moving forward? So let me step back here, because I'm sort of veering off a little bit, but let me step back here and say where I think we are, how to deal with it, especially in light of all of this that's happening with resources, and why I think things will be better pretty soon. So ultimately, for the stock market, I don't think we're done yet. We have not seen any of the classic signs of a bottom. What happened, this rally that we've seen over the last month or two was really caused by extremely negative positioning, and meaning everybody was betting against the stock market. And when you have flushed out all of your would-be sellers and all your nervous Nellies, and you've gotten them all out of the market, all that you've got left eventually are buyers. And all you need is a little buying to come in, any reason at all, and you've got a lot of people that are going to rush right back in. And that's typically what happens in major bear markets, and I think that's what happened here. But now we've run into some what we call resistance levels, areas where traders are going to say that's where you're going to have a problem. And sure enough, the markets have run into trouble. One of the reasons the markets ran is because in the last Fed meeting, Jerome Powell made some comments that a lot of people felt like were signaling by him that he'd be done by the end of the year. But today he made it very clear that he's not going to be done by the end of the year. And the market's down 2% today. So how are we into a recession? Why do I think it doesn't matter? What do we do? Where are we going from here? The reason I think it doesn't matter is because we only really know about recessions in the rearview mirror. And the stock market leads us out of recessions usually, and the market starts moving before the recession is over. So really it's a matter of semantics, trying to argue about whether we're in a recession or not. What matters is, when will the stock market start signaling that we're going to pull out of this? That's what matters. And the economy around here is in pretty good shape. I really don't think we're in a recession, so I don't think we have to worry about it so much. But housing prices are still too high. Mortgage rates have gone up. Nationally, we're going to see the numbers get worse, and you're going to hear a lot of talk about a recession. And unless they can do something with energy, inflation's going to remain high, and so the Fed is going to stay on hike mode. So it may be a while before the stock market comes around to that idea. It may be coming around today to that idea, but it's going to create a headwind for the stock market in the short run. If the downturn in the economy does start to create less demand for gasoline and fuel, and if we have a mild winter, and if things calm down in Europe, then you'll start to see those numbers come back, and maybe the Fed eases off, but that's a lot to ask. So what we're doing now with our portfolios and at the pension fund is we're being somewhat cautious. And remember, we had interest rates falling for 40 years. That's really key to understand. The reason that's important to understand is stocks became an asset allocation decision. If we think rates are falling, just put it in the S&P 500 or something similar, and you're going to do fine. Moving forward, we're not in that environment. It's probably going to be more like what we saw in the 70s. And so I think having resources as part of your portfolios will be more important moving forward. Energy and gas, oil and gas investments. Maybe invest in fertilizer companies, things like that, to protect yourself not only against inflation, but against the weaponization of resources that's going on politically around the world. And it's not going to be easy. I think The summer days are over, and it's going to be a little tougher for the next few years. I don't know how you unwind a $9 trillion balance sheet. They tried to do it at the end of 2018. I don't know if you remember this. In September of 18, Jerome Powell said, we're going to start unwinding the balance sheet. Right at that point, it was 4.2 trillion. By March of 19, 6 months later, they were cutting interest rates and adding to the balance sheet again. So I don't trust them to do the right thing. I think they're trying to do the right thing. I don't think they have understood that this is a mess that they created, and they printed way, way, way too much money. That was on the monetary side. Now on the fiscal side, we're doing it too with the giveaways. So, does that cheer everybody up? Historically, the September, late August to early October timeframe in a midterm election year is really rocky for the stock market, and I don't think this is going to be any exception. But historically, the third year of the presidential cycle is very good. Historically, once you've dropped 25% in the stock market, the next year has averaged about 38% over the next 12 months. Stocks are probably going to be a more attractive asset class than bonds because they at least give you a fighting chance against inflation. So, and corporate profits, corporations have been pretty nimble here. Profits are up 9.5%. That's pretty good in this environment. So I think there's going to be places where we can make money. It's just going to look different than it's been over the last 40 years. And I think our economy is better than most around the world. As I said the last time I was here, we're probably the prettiest horse in the glue factory. But it's just going to be different. And it's, we've had a long period of prosperity, but a lot of that was caused by more and more and more booze in the punch bowl. And now we're going to have a hangover for a while. So I don't mean to get too negative here. I think our area is really pretty good. I think our real estate's going to continue to be pretty good. But I got to tell you, we have a lot of money coming in our shop from people that have sold real estate deals, and they say, I don't want to buy real estate at these prices. I don't want to buy real estate at 3 cap rates. I don't trust the environment. I don't trust so certain types of activities are definitely going to slow down. The baby boomers are getting older. So a lot of what's happening is you have people that are 60 plus, people that like Bob Mitchell's children. They're selling their businesses, they're doing different things, but in this area, I think we're gonna do okay. I just think it's going to be more challenging, more interesting, but a lot less fun. So with that being said, I hope I didn't bring everybody down, but I'll open it up for a few questions.
Does national debt or our deficit spending have any bearing on all this? Is there ever in our lifetimes, do you project that we're going to come to a time to pay like?
Yeah. So the question is the national debt, the deficits having an impact, and is there going to be a time where we have to pay the piper? Yeah, so a lot of people are worried that we're going to end up like Japan. Our government debt to GDP is now over 140%. And what happens is debt service eats up a lot of your tax dollar revenues when you have that much debt. So it takes away from other services. If you want to know why there's crime in a lot of these cities that are just skyrocketing, they don't have the money because, again, a lot of the revenue that we create now goes to debt service. So I think it's already having an impact, and it'll continue to have an impact. The problem is, if you're a politician, you don't have any incentive to balance the budget. You really don't. I mean, if you can bring the bacon home to your district, that's how you're going to get reelected. That's just the way it is. And people don't understand the debt and deficit numbers because it doesn't feel like it impacts them on an everyday life, but it is. It is impacting them, and that's why we have inflation, and that is impacting people. So I think we're paying the piper right now. Carl?
You talked about the relationship between printing more money and inflation. What's your take on cryptocurrency? Bitcoin, for example, is scarce. They're not making any more of it. Do you think that it's got staying power, or do you think it's just a passing fad?
It's a great question. Question is about cryptocurrencies, here to stay or passing fad. I go back to Aristotle and what he said about the requirements for a global currency. It really gets interesting. He said it has to be divisible. Well, gold and silver are certainly divisible, and cryptocurrency is all digits. You can divide it out so it fits there. Transportable. Cryptocurrency is more transportable than any other currency there's ever been. And in fact, I think that's what happened in Cyprus. They put in capital controls to where people couldn't pull X amount out of their ATMs or leave the country with it. All of a sudden, you saw Bitcoin skyrocket. I think a lot of people were converting. So that's 2 for 2 out of the 4. Third one gets a little muddier, and that is it has to be homogeneous. Now, I agree that one Bitcoin is just like another, but you have Ether, you have Litecoin. Right now, I think there's a little bit of a danger of a Tower of Babel with the cryptocurrencies until, and it appears to me it's either going to be Bitcoin or Ether or both, but there's a little bit of an issue there. But the last one it completely fails on, and that is it has to have some intrinsic value. And let me give you an example of why that's important. In Puerto Rico, when the hurricane happened a couple of years ago, everybody lost their power. Well, if you had a bag full of quarters, you could go buy some canned beans, right? If you have crypto, it's completely worthless. So I don't know how they solve that, but I think it's important. Now, do I think it's going to be around and here to stay? Yeah, I do. If it gets north of 30,000 again, I wouldn't buy that ever. But if it got down back around 10 or 12, I'd probably just nibble at it a little bit. I think you can have a small amount of your portfolio in something like that, but almost like Vegas money until they're more, it's more permeated into the economy. Now, blockchain and services around blockchain are already permeating. I think those are here to stay for sure.
You talked a little about the jobs market, about people with 2 jobs, people with part-time jobs. Everywhere you go, you see help wanted signs. And yet we're told that our unemployment rate is as low as it's ever been.
Yeah.
Folks that are no longer counted as
Yes.
part of that employment, and that is permanent.
Yeah, that's a great question. The U6 unemployment numbers, which really count everybody who's qualified to work, those are at 62%. We're at 62%. It's still a real low number. So yeah, there's help wanted, but there's a mismatch on skills versus skilled workers. And there's a lot of people that have figured out how not to work that aren't coming back into the workforce yet. But there are some signs that they're going to, and maybe that's because of higher gasoline prices, I'm not sure, but there are some signs that some of that workforce is coming off the sidelines. I think there was, yeah.
So recently there was an article about the negotiations with Iran that actually had some potential, real potential food. But as far as I understand, there's a bad impact energy prices of profit and may never come back in a lifetime. How is that?
So I think they're already selling a lot of oil to Russia and China. If they open up Iran, does it hit the market with so much supply that it permanently drops prices? We don't think so. We don't think it's A, enough, or that B, it will get through to the Western world enough, even with a relaxation of sanctions.
So go to the same lane that most people are talking about, 64. Just take that as a topic going forward.
I had a client that died 2 years ago with $95 million. Made a couple of mistakes. He didn't, and I think we need to wrap up here, but he didn't have an estate plan, and his heirs wrote a $38 million check to the IRS. But he was 90 years old. People are living longer. Right now, the bond market is paying less than the inflation rate. So 60-40 worked great while interest rates were falling for 40 straight years. So the 5-year numbers look good, the 10-year numbers look good, the 20-year numbers look good, the 30-year numbers look good, but interest rates aren't falling anymore. And that will take away returns from the bond market, which are now paying, again, less than the inflation rate. So if you have so much money that that you don't need to beat inflation so much, you just want to see those nominal dollars, it's okay. If you want to outpace inflation, I think it's an idea whose time is over, at least in terms of where we are in the current environment. Okay, I see we're out of time. Thank you very much for having me.
Jim, thank you so much. You may well know it's a tradition of the Rotary Club of Fort Worth to present a book to the Fort Worth Library in your honor, and there's a copy of that book plate as a memento. Thank you again.
Great, thank you.
If I could have Roland Johnson please join me. He's with Paxton Patterson. We're going to have our drawing for the Texas Wesleyan VIP tickets. Please draw 4. There are 4 pairs.
Just real quick, I'm a class of 77 alumnus of Texas Wesleyan, and it was amazing that for 60-some years, we never lost a football game. Of course, bad news was all the boys went to World War II, and we canceled the team, but it's back, so. Okay, first name is Harriet Carroll. Okay.
3 more.
Christy Eckler. Got some girl power going here. Kathy Sheffield.
And the last one.
Last one. Mix them up here. Let's see. Past President Gary Cumby. I was drawing one time at a conference, and one of the people that threw it in had a pin sticking in his, thinking that you'd reach in, you'd get stuck with the pin, and you'd pull his name out. Well, I got stuck with the pin, and I threw his name away. So thanks for no pins.
Thank you, Roland.
I'm going to keep these one thing. So the VIP passes, I'm going to go to the Hampton Inn today between 1 and 5 and pick them up. If you want to go get yours today, then you got to go over there with me, or else I'll have them all at the VIP section of the stadium. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Roland. And Roland, thank you as well. He partnered with us on a sponsorship. So when you go to the game, be sure and go to the Rams section and buy a t-shirt, and you will notice our logo, and you will also see us at the Rotary tent out there. So thank you again, Roland. I do have, for the 4 of you, I will also send them via email, but there are some special instructions I have printed out. And for everyone else, our tickets are at will call. And I will also follow up before the day's out with just a few helpful tidbits.
There's going to be a block for how many, I see how many parents have purchased.
Yes, and we will have reserved seating on the 50-yard line, so we can all sit together. And I can just imagine the dinner table conversation at your house. And speaking, speaking of that, I wanted to also let you know about the Trinity River cleanup. Richard Knight is going to be at the table. He's already at the table. Because of the flooding this week with all the rain, there's an emergency cleanup underway, and it's been going on yesterday, today. And if anyone has interest or time, it's going through 8 p.m. tonight, and again, 8 to 11 a.m. for the Saturday and Sunday. There is a board of directors meeting in the president's conference room on the 11th floor. We want to remind you to consider advertising and sponsoring our programs. We hope to see you at the Tex-Mex game tomorrow night. You can certainly buy tickets at Farrington Field at the door. Finally, remember there is no meeting next weekend. It's Labor Day. Please do join us on September 9th. We've got Secretary Pete Guerin, former Congressman and U.S. Secretary of the Army and former club president, and Paul Harris Fellow. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.